So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Loses the Championship and as well as Hinata. So let's start the series. Through the trees, a person staggered, its body covered in mud, filth, little pieces of leaves, and what looked like some blood. The figurines were dressed in an orange jumpsuit with paint spots and what looked like other bits of cloth that had been haphazardly sewed onto it in an attempt to make the outfit less bright. It was a futile attempt. Based on the quantity of baby fat on his body and his overall height, which even seemed a little small for his age, the figure was male and no older than 12. His skin tone was a light tan, and his face was round. His cheeks, however, had 3 whisker marks on each side, for a total of 6, and they didn't appear to be painted on, rather, they were a natural part of the skin. His face was framed by short golden blonde bangs, with the remainder of his golden blonde hair sticking up everywhere. His eyes were piercing cerulean blue. Uzumaki, an academy student from Hyde Ninja Village Geikyo no Sato, was the figure's name. Or, as he frequently called it, his eternal prison. The life that Naruto had led had been nothing but agony. Because his life was so miserable, even the sickest, most depraved, and lowest of child rapists would never have been sentenced to such a terrible lifestyle because it would have been considered an excessively harsh penalty. However, for a reason he was unaware of, he was forced to endure that life for the final 12 years of his life. Naruto grunted to himself as he made his way to a nearby small pond and took a tiny canteen out of his pocket. He set the canteen on the ground next to him as he arrived at the pond, then he leaned down and cupped his hands in the water before bringing the water to his face and gulping it down. He felt refreshed by the cool, clean water on his lips. He repeated this several times before grabbing his canteen and submerging it in the water to let it fill up. He drank some of it after filling it up, then dipped it back into the water in the hopes that it would last him the entire day. With all the training they only make me go through, I will be lucky if this lasts until noon. He snorted inwardly at that irrational optimism. He sighed as he looked toward the sun and noticed where it was in the sky. He knew that he would have to depart when the sun reached the tree across the field. Though the academy primarily cared about reading and random facts, which were completely useless to a shinobi, he was exceptionally intelligent when it came to practical skills. However, he might benefit from that small fact today. In all honesty, he had never desired to become a shinobi or to commit himself to the village, but he was compelled to do so by unavoidable circumstances. He had been left on the streets after being expelled from the orphanage. He was frequently beaten by both shinobi and civilians. Only by pure luck and circumstance was he spared death, either because shinobi halted the beatings or because they couldn't complete the task and were able to get him to the hospital quickly enough to save his life. He survived everything, and he somehow recovered, but he was sick of it all. He enrolled at the academy specifically to learn how to defend himself from the people who attacked him because he was sick of being helpless in the face of these jerks, and sick of being assaulted and beaten. He had to endure all of that to learn how to fight and defend himself, but regrettably, they placed more emphasis on academics and literacy. But what they taught in the academy was insufficient to help him protect himself. Only a sensei could teach him what he needed to defend himself, and obtaining a sensei would require graduating from the academy and becoming a genin, which was another major problem. The only way out of this hamlet would be to become a missing nin and spend the rest of his life being chased by hunter nin, but he had few other choices if he graduated and became a genin. He may thank the citizens for preventing him from passing the previous 2 times, as this would be his 3rd attempt to pass the examinations. He had twice been attacked, surrounded by bystanders on exam days, and battered until he was unable to walk. This prevented him from taking the examinations and forced him to attend the academy for an additional year in order to take them. He inhaled deeply, sighed, and raised his gaze to the heavens. He was almost ready to go for the academy. All he could hope was that those pesky civilians wouldn't swarm him this time. He started walking to the academy after putting his canteen in his pocket. He did, however, make it halfway across the field before having to leap back in disbelief when a ninja materialized right in front of him amid a rush of leaves. The ninja was looking outwardly. Naruto Uzumaki, by order of the Sandame, I am here to escort you to the academy so as to prevent you being unable to attend the final graduation exam due to the attacks caused by the villagers of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir. The ninja grabbed Naruto's shoulder as he attempted to approach him, but Naruto scowled and said, Look, I can walk to the academy by myself. I don't need a ninja to walk me to school. I never said we would be walking there. The ninja made a hand gesture before Naruto could respond, and the two of them disappeared in a shunshin. Village Geikir Academy's Hyde Ninja. Children at the Hyde Ninja Village Geikir Academy started their lives as soldiers committed to defending the Hyde Ninja Village. There were kids everywhere in the schoolyard, either making their way to the classes or starting to talk to their classmates and friends. The ninja and Naruto appeared out of nowhere in a whirl of leaves just outside the academy's boundaries. After a moment of stumbling, Naruto scowled up at the ninja. Naruto disappeared in the same shunshin, and the ninja paid them no attention. Well, at least I don't have to worry about a damn crowd attacking me this time, Naruto murmured, frowning and turning to the side as he started to enter the academy's walls. The people who saw him became silent as he passed. Before long, they and others started whispering to one another. Hey, that's the dope, right? It's unbelievable that he actually showed up. Yes, he didn't even show up last year. Yeah, I did hear that. He claimed to have been hurt. Yeah, most likely because he was acting foolishly as usual. As they proceeded to disparage him behind his back, the kids started to chuckle. He had been accustomed to it, and had long since ceased caring what people said about him, so it's not like he truly cared. He kept walking toward the entrance to the academy buildings without turning to face them. Hey, Dobe! Naruto came to a halt when a group of bystanders surrounded him and blocked his path. When he turned around, he saw his apparent Nikan Akamaru, Kiba Inuzuka, smiling while holding a white dog on his head. Naruto looked at Kiba with a grin. So, you actually decided to show up this year? I'm surprised. I heard that you didn't show up last year, or the year before. Made the excuse that you were too hurt to even come to class. Yeah, right, you probably decided to just goof off like you always do, you stupid fucker. He sighed, shook his head, and gazed up at the academy before making his way to the school's door. Hey, you worthless shit! I'm talking to you! Kiba sneered. Naruto stumbled and scowled at the two civilian youths who shoved him as he attempted to pass them. Kiba grumbled. You would do best to listen to your betters. Especially since everyone else is better than you. He scoffed. Then again, what would anyone expect from a no-name, motherless shit of an orphan? Naruto looked at him with a snort. Oh please Kiba, I have heard that insult more often than you can count. Then again, you can't count that high, can you? At this, the other children fell silent and turned to face Kiba, who gritted his teeth and growled. Watch yourself, Dobe, Kiba growled. Because I might accidentally lose my temper. Why should I be worried about somebody like you? Naruto scowled and muttered. Kiba grumbled. Because I am a somebody, the heir to the Inuzuka clan. As additional children gathered to observe the group, there was silence among them. He turned and shoved past the two civilian children, who were too stunned to respond. Naruto scoffed. Oh, so that's why you can't come up with anything intelligent to say. You do after all come from a family of inbreds. I wonder which one of your uncles your mother fucked to produce you, Kiba. You fucking bastard! Kiba screamed as he charged at Naruto, knocking him over before jumping on top of him and viciously punching him in the face. Kiba remained silent, his mouth hanging open until his eyes narrowed. As Kiba started beating up Naruto, the other children were encouraging him. With a smile on his face, Kiba began to grab him so he could kick him. Naruto took advantage of the situation to kick Kiba hard in the side of the knee. Ag! Kiba cried out in agony, gripping his knee. Naruto quickly stood up and punched him in the chin before kicking him in the chest, sending him flying back a good 5 feet and landing on his back. Akamaru, get him! Kiba snarled as he raised his head. Naruto was caught off guard as Akamaru suddenly leaped out and sank his teeth into his leg. Looking down at the puppy, Naruto scowled and swore. AGH! You cheap-ass little dash! But before he could finish, Kiba got back up and crashed into him, fighting him with equal ferocity, while Akamaru bit into him hard. Naruto slapped Akamaru away, forcing the puppy to whine, and gained enough leverage to flip Kiba off him. With wide eyes, Kiba exclaimed, Akamaru! He glanced up at Naruto and hissed, You'll pay for that! He took a kunai out of his bag and charged toward Naruto, aiming it at his chest. Kiba raced at Naruto, who lurched back and swiftly raised his right arm to deflect the blow with his right side. Sqlch. The kunai went straight through Naruto's forearm, piercing deep into his flesh. Naruto screamed in agony. Aggghhh! As Kiba attacked him and continued to strike him repeatedly. That'll teach you to mess with your betters, Kiba said after finally getting off him and spitting on him. He then turned and started to leave, with the other citizens laughing as they walked. As he pulled the kunai from Kiba's arm, Naruto hissed and grumbled, glaring down at the wound and swearing. The big hole in his forearm appeared to hiss as he saw the wound start to close, the muscles, tendons, and veins all healing up, and new skin growing over the flesh that had already mended. He scowled as he looked at his other wounds, which also started to heal. He sighed and turned to face the kunai, still covered in blood, that Kiba had pressed into his forearm when he couldn't fight him fairly. He snorted as he looked at his hazy reflection in the blood-stained metal, then put the kunai in his pocket and walked on into his classroom. After 10 minutes, the classroom of Naruto. After dealing with around 6 other students who found it amusing to single him out and treat him badly, Naruto eventually made it to his classroom. But it's not like he gave a damn, they were completely irrelevant to him. When he got to the classroom, it was crowded with kids chatting among themselves and dreaming that being a shinobi was their dream. He scowled as he walked into the classroom, took his customary seat, and glanced around at the other pupils who would be sitting for the test today. But as he glanced around, he moved his head toward the doorway, which was starting to open. As his Naruto friend Uchiha entered the classroom, he let out a frustrated groan. With a stern frown, the lone survivor of Uchiha searched the classroom for what appeared to be a seat. His gaze fell on a seat next beside Naruto. He quickly took the seat after descending the steps. As Naruto glanced around the classroom and seen the irate expressions on the faces of several of the girls, he could not help but stare at the Uchiha. Naruto snorted and turned away, unable to put up with some conceited, egotistical fangirl. Out of my way, Enardio Baka! Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka seized hold of his shoulders and jerked him out of his chair before Naruto realized. They then started fighting over the seat they had just torn him from. A trail of blood started to flow from Naruto's open wound on his skull, delivering an unbelievably sharp bolt of pain as he was pushed out of the chair and lost his balance owing to the abrupt shift, landing him headfirst into a desk corner. As Sakura and Ino kept yelling at one another, "Back of forehead! It's mine!" they started tugging at each other's hair. Grabbing Ino's hair, Sakura frowned and said, "No, it's mine! Fuck you, Ino pig!" Naruto pushed himself up as the two argued further, snarling as he went into his pouch for the kunai and glaring at them both. He was ready to tear the kunai out when Irika and Mizuki's forms appeared through the classroom doors. "All right, everybody get in your seats, now!" Irika scowled and yelled. Since the final Uchiha was seated directly next to his chair, Naruto scowled at Mizuki and then turned to look back at Ino and Sakura, who were still fighting over it. He turned away and sat somewhere else, snorting uncontrollably. If they wanted to sit next to the prodigy, Uchiha, then by all means. Today is the day of which will change your lives forever. Today is the day where you will all be tested and judged to see who among you is qualified to become genin of the village of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir no Sado, Irika said, clearing his throat as he and Mizuki moved to the front of the room. As they heard this, the students joyfully whooped and yelled. Irika lifted his hand to calm them down. "However, you will all need to pass the tests given to you at a marginal level. If your score is too low, then you will not be allowed to go on to become genin of the leaf." For a brief while, the room was silent, but then the classroom was filled with whispering. Since students were not permitted to retake the academy after the third failure, Naruto grimaced and gritted his teeth, which did not bode well for him. He merely prayed he received enough points in the proper location to pass. After Irika was done, Mizuki went to the stack of papers, picked them up, and started going around the classroom, giving each student a sheet of paper. However, a tiny smirk appeared on Mizuki's face as he approached Naruto, and a sheet of paper slipped into the stack with a slight hand motion. He smiled as he arrived at Naruto's desk and then set a sheet on the table in front of the blonde. He couldn't help but smirk ruthlessly as he left, but he immediately covered it up and completed passing out the sheets. Irika said, "Okay everyone, the test will begin, now," once Mizuki was done. Students immediately started writing their responses on the papers as soon as Irika made her announcement. Naruto read the first question, scowled, and glanced down at the page. Date of the founding of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir. When is this ever going to be useful to me? Naruto scowled in response. He shook his head and let out a frustrated sigh before starting to write the response on the sheet. A nasty glimmer entered Mizuki's eye, and he noticed this in the corner of his eye, smiling. 1 hour time skip. After everyone had completed and turned in their test papers, Irika looked up at them and said, "All right, I want everyone to follow me. We will be heading out to the training field for our next portion of the exam." He got up and started to leave, with the students following closely behind. As the other students went outside, Naruto trailed behind them. As he brought out a crate for this portion of the test, Mizuki trailed after, a gleam in his eye. They had been led to one of the training grounds, which had been modified for the test, once everyone had left the building. Irika continued, "All right, the next portion of the exam will be demonstrating your skill in throwing weapons. You will each be given 5 kunai, and 5 shuriken for each arm. You must show proficiency in this area of becoming a shinobi, as in the future your very life may depend on your accuracy with a shuriken. Now I will call each of you out in alphabetical order, and you will then be presented your shuriken and kunai." He glanced at the clipboard and announced his first name of each student. As the students started throwing their kunai, Naruto observed that the majority of them missed their targets. Just a small percentage were able to get the kunai to penetrate the target, and even fewer demonstrated any accuracy. Only a small number of pupils were accurate enough to get the shuriken to hit the target and make them stick into it, making the situation even worse. Even more students missed the targets, and even fewer were able to get the shuriken to even dig into the target. Naruto Uzumaki. When Naruto was called up, his reverie was interrupted, and he turned to face Irika. Irika was coughing. "Naruto Uzumaki, would you please come up and perform the designated action?" With a groan, Naruto approached the table to get his shuriken and kunai. In the meantime, Mizuki was grinning and slightly flexing his fingers. Naruto prepared himself in a posture and grasped the shuriken and kunai. As he continued to flex his fingers, Mizuki looked down at them and scowled a little. After inhaling, Naruto threw the kunai in the direction of the target. His body used his muscle memory from months of practice, training, and trial and error as he moved his hands. With force and accuracy, the kunai flew through the air and struck the training post target. This startled the entire class, who started whispering to one another in amazement at what they had just witnessed. On his initial attempt, the dobe had received a bullseye. However, a number of other students in the class were chatting about cheating or beginner's luck. Naruto grabbed another kunai and threw it at the post, ignoring them, striking the target just outside of its innermost ring. Mizuki muttered a curse when he observed this, and as he moved his fingers, they flexed more quickly and cracked. In the meantime, Naruto was hurling his third kunai. Again, Mizuki flexed his hand. When Naruto threw the kunai, it completely missed its aim. They started to openly make fun of him, and the class burst out laughing. What a loser! I knew it was an anomaly. As if he could intentionally be any good. Naruto scowled in frustration and threw his final two kunai, which had the same effect. As Naruto continued to miss with the kunai, Irika moaned and noted each miss. Meanwhile, Mizuki was ecstatic and barely concealed it from both his students and himself. Naruto started the shuriken part, clenching his teeth slightly. Mizuki smiled and started to flex his fingers, but as he looked down at them, his eyes became panicked. Damn it! He scowled as he looked up at Naruto, who started acting normally once more. He flexed and cracked his fingers once again, growling inside. As he watched Naruto continue to hit the target in a coordinated manner, Irika nodded his head in agreement. He grinned while continuing to commend Naruto for this section. Naruto was on his last 3 shuriken and had started to reach for the first of the 3, but Mizuki continued to frown as his fingers moved. Mizuki swore to himself once again, and then his fingers flexed again, causing a brief smirk to flash across his face. The shuriken that Naruto hurled completely missed its target. Irika moaned as he made a poor mark on Naruto's sheet, and the chorus of laughing broke out again. Naruto cursed and snatched up the next 2 shuriken, which he hurled but missed with much less accuracy than the previous one. Irika sighed as he summoned up the next individual after finishing putting down the marks. Naruto, you're done. As the next person approached, Naruto swore and moved aside, while Mizuki grinned and examined his fingers. They went inside for the next part of the test once the final student had completed the throwing weapons. When all of the students were seated again, Irika spoke. Now is the final portion of the exam. You will each perform the 3 basic academy spirit art, the kawarimi, henge, and bunshin. After examining your scores for the written portion of the exam, and your scores for the throwing weapons, and adding in the scores you receive from the ni spirit art portion, you will be graded, and depending on your score, become a genin of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir no Sato. A chorus of students cheered, yet several pupils said nothing, just waiting for the test to start. Mizuki, meanwhile, approached the stack of papers and grinned upon seeing Naruto's on top. He glanced about for a moment, then glanced at the page and smiled. With the exception of Naruto's name, the ink on it started to disappear, turning as blank as it had been when it was passed out. After giving Irika a little smirk, Mizuki picked up the pile of papers and handed them to him. Thank you, Mizuki. Irika grinned and started grading the papers, but when he saw Naruto's name, he frowned and asked, Why does he do this? With a shrug, Mizuki said, I don't know, Irika. All right, I will call you into the other room where you will display your capability in the 3 Academy Ni Spirit Art. Irika sighed and concluded marking the papers. He then called the first student and got up to enter the room. Naruto waited what seemed like hours for the right moment to use the tactics in order to pass this test and advance his skills so that he would never be left defenseless again. After what seemed like an additional hour, Irika said, "All right, Naruto, it is your turn," as she left the room with a joyful pupil wearing their headband with pride. Naruto stood up and moved down the aisle toward Irika while holding the door open, grinning uncontrollably. As he walked in, he took in the space. It was much bigger than the classroom where the children were seated. He wondered to himself why this room had been left empty. Irika said, "Naruto," as Naruto glanced around the room. Irika quickly turned to Naruto and sighed. "I will be very frank with you, Naruto. Your possibilities towards graduation are not looking very good. If you fail to do any of the required Need Spirit Art, then you will automatically fail, and since this is your third time, you will not be allowed to re-enter the academy." Naruto's eyes grew slightly wider, then slightly narrowed as he hissed, "Transparently clear, sensei." "Good, now I want you to perform a kawarimi with the chair directly to your left," Irika said, nodding his head. Naruto glanced at the chair after turning his head to the left. He made the kawarimi hand signals while nodding his head. The positions of Naruto and the chair were exchanged in a swirl of smoke. Irika raised his eyebrows. "Good, very good. Now I need for you to perform the henge and transform into either Mizuki or myself." Naruto made a number of hand gestures and nodded his head. His inner energy gushed out of his body, creating a cloud of smoke around him. As the mist dissipated, Irika and Mizuki saw that Naruto had changed into Irika. "Good, now all that is left is the bunshin." Irika grinned. Naruto nodded his head and started to shape his core energy by using hand signals. Mizuki scowled while tracing the underside of the desk with his fingertips and grinning. Just as Naruto was performing the technique, a bolt of core energy appeared out of a single spark, traveled beneath the desk, and arced all over the floor before appearing to blend with the wood as it approached him. "Bunshin no Spirit Art," was the technique that Naruto said as he finished shaping his core energy. 2 puffs of smoke then emerged next to him. As the smoke clouds started to clear, Irika leaned closer. "Just to expose 2 ill-formed clones." "I am sorry, Naruto, but you fail." Irika groaned and turned to face Naruto. He then walked past him, who was staring at the floor with wide-open eyes, and headed for the door. He had successfully executed this spirit art just last night, and he had done everything correctly, from the creation of the core energy to the manifestation of the bunshin. He was shocked to learn that all of his effort had been in vain. Irika turned back to Naruto and said, "You must leave so that we can make room for the next student." For a brief while, Naruto's trance was broken, allowing him to acknowledge Irika and leave the room. "Everything went as planned," Mizuki said with an internal smile as he left the room. Time skip. Naruto had left the academy, entered the field next to the academy building, and sat on a seat that was near the edge of the field. His hair concealed his countenance as he bent his head and gazed at his fingertips, his eyes unfocused with contemplation. What had taken place? What might have gone wrong that would have led to his failure? He had been practicing in the Academy of Ni Spirit Art for weeks. He had fallen asleep in the forest night after night from exhaustion, only to be awakened by the sun's rays striking his face as he lay in the mud. He was so proficient at the kawarimi that he hardly needed to use the hand signals anymore, and he could trade places with a twig that was several meters away. Then came the henge, which he had mastered over the course of 2 months due to the fact that he had to continuously train himself for various figures, sizes, and shapes. He was aware that he couldn't just use Irika's height, figure, and body form to imitate a bandit, a civilian, or a nobleman if he needed to use the spirit art outside of Hyde Ninja Village. Finally, the Bunshin spirit art, which he considered to be a useless illusion that served only to divert civilians and possibly bandits. However, he had managed to master the spirit art after 3 months of training, despite the fact that it was useless against a true shinobi and only served to weaken the user, albeit marginally. However, he was unable to alter the fact that he had failed. He had lost his best opportunity to grow stronger, gain authority, and never be vulnerable again. Hey Naruto! When Naruto looked up and saw Mizuki's beaming face, his reverie was interrupted. Looking back down, Naruto scowled and asked, "What is it, Mizuki?" Now, Naruto, is that any way to speak to your sensei?" Mizuki asked with a smile and a laugh. Naruto laughed. "I failed the exam 3 times, Mizuki. I am no longer considered a student, Mizuki, so you are hardly my sensei." Mizuki sighed and scowled before turning away and saying, "It's a shame." Snorting, Naruto asked, "What is?" Mizuki breathed a sigh of relief and started. "The fact that you were considered failed the first 2 times you took the exams, just because you were too injured to come in. And now, because of that technicality, you are not allowed to re-enter the academy to try the exam next year. And now, so many people will remember you as the dead last low stash." Naruto growled and gave him a fierce look. "Is there a point to this conversation other than rubbing salt into a gaping wound, Mizuki?" Naruto snapped. Mizuki looked at Naruto and coughed. Anyways. I am just trying to say that it is unfair that you are unable to become a shinobi because of a technicality, so I am going to offer you a second chance." Naruto's eyes grew a little wider, and he raised them to Mizuki, his gaze cautious and curious. His eyes squinted, though, as if this chance were too good to be true. "What are you talking about, Mizuki?" he asked. Mizuki grinned. "It is a special test, one that tests all your skills as a shinobi in a realistic setting, one that can bring about all the skills you have learned, and apply them all in a setting which they will be useful. After all, you can't exactly draw upon all your skills in a controlled classroom setting, much less see if they are up to par with what is expected of a shinobi, right?" Naruto merely stared at him with his still squinted eyes without responding. "However, if you fail this, well, the consequences will be dire," Mizuki went on, grinning at Naruto. "So, what do you say, Naruto? Want to take one last shot at this?" Mizuki asked, waiting for his answer. As Naruto took in the information, he glanced down at his feet. He had the opportunity to undergo this test, become a shinobi, gain strength, and gain power. He would never again be helpless. A part of him was yelling something else, something much softer, but it spoke to him more than the other voice in his head. His desires were screaming at him to seize this opportunity, to use it to strengthen himself. Why squander his life in a village that hates him for the possibility of becoming stronger, a possibility that might never materialize? There was no assurance that they would teach him anything, even if he were to become a shinobi. He witnessed the angry glares and twisted murmurs that shinobi gave him, telling him that he was undeserving and that he should simply crawl into a pit and die. In a village that will never give him a chance, why squander his life? With his fingers clenched, Naruto said, "No, I will not." But this is a one-time opportunity, you would be able to dash," Mizuki stammered as he attempted to talk, stunned beyond comprehension. Then Naruto turned to Mizuki and yelled, "No! I am done with this village! I am done with being constantly set back no matter how hard I try to move forward." Naruto snorted. "If Hyde Ninja Village will not let me become strong within its walls, then I will have to leave its walls so that I can gain strength." He turned away from Mizuki and walked away, saying, "You can take your second chance, Mizuki. I got my own." After a minute, Mizuki's face twisted into a furious frown. He muttered, "Damn it!" and scowled as he gazed up at the headmaster tower. Looks like I am going to have to do this myself. He snorted and started to return to the academy as the students started to stream out while their parents and loved ones were pouring into the academy grounds at the same time. Years of sabotaging that demon brat, and it all goes to waste. He sighed and glanced back towards the tower for a moment, a wry smirk emerging on his face. Oh well, he said, making his way into the academy towards his office while his plans were racing through his head. Using Naruto. Without pausing for anything or to listen to the murmurs of others around him, Naruto headed straight for his apartment complex as soon as he left the academy grounds. He went by stores, eateries, and other establishments in Hyde Ninja Village's business district. He went by the now-dead husk of the Ichiraku ramen stall as he went through. For a while, Naruto went there every day merely to have something to eat because it was the only business in the neighborhood that would sell to him at a reasonable price. They had already doomed themselves, though, because the village soon turned against him and he was eventually driven out of the store. They were compelled to close their business because they had served him and no one in the village ever went there again. Most likely, they had departed from the community in search of employment elsewhere. Naruto proceeded toward the apartment, passing through each district one at a time, till he eventually arrived at the one where he resided. His apartment building was situated in the center of the neighborhood, which shared a boundary with the residential sector and the slums. It wasn't the worst location to live, but it wasn't the greatest either. The streets were dirty and littered with rubbish. Prostitutes and bums lined the lanes, while a few shinobi and regular citizens strolled along the sides of the road. Naruto frowned as he gazed at this location. He had been compelled to live here for the past 10 years or more, ever since he was expelled from the orphanage as a youngster. He was thrust into this after being admitted to the academy, but numerous other orphans in comparable circumstances were placed in far better families. When he eventually reached his apartment complex, Naruto scoffed and looked up. After today, none of that will matter anymore, he said, hastily making his way upstairs to his unit. He went inside after unlocking the door. The vandals who kept breaking into his apartment and destroying his belongings, along with his own lack of initiative to clean it, left the place in complete disarray. The walls were covered in graffiti, the furniture was broken, and there were big holes in the wall. Naruto would initially attempt to fix any damage he could, but eventually he stopped giving a damn about whether or not they trashed his place. He pushed some garbage aside and looked about, searching the floor, till a tiny smirk appeared on his lips. Leaning over, he inserted his nails between the floorboards and raised a tiny panel. It had money, non-perishable food containers, a few little necessities, and whatever else he would need on a mission. He had put the supplies there for when he went on a mission, but it didn't appear he would be using them for what they were meant for. He quickly packed the containers, cash, non-perishables, and the little map of Hai no Kuni that he had smuggled out of a store a few months prior into his bag. He grinned contentedly as he watched the sun set outside the window. With a sigh, he got up and left the apartment building, making his way to one of the village exits. Tower of the Headmaster. The Sandaime headmaster of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir no Sato, third headmaster Sarutobi, was seated at his desk looking through the files of the recently graduated academy students. He let out a dejected sigh as he looked at the list of recent grads. Since it was Naruto Uzumaki's third examination failure, he was not permitted to retake it. "Aide, please send for my ninja, I have an assignment for them, tell them it is urgent," the third headmaster said sharply as he started to massage his temples. "I had hoped I would not have to resort to this," he said, taking a deep breath before pressing a button beneath his desk and speaking into a microphone on his desk. Hissing came from the speaker as he pressed the button, but then a woman's voice said, "Yes, Sandaime-sama." With a sigh, the third headmaster sat back in his chair and gazed at the ceiling. He refused to let years of preparation be squandered on insignificant details, even though he knew the council would give him hell after this. Knock, knock, knock. The third headmaster sat upright in his chair, coughed, and turned to face the entrance. Enter. 3 ninja entered the room as the door opened. The Sandaime was facing them when they formed a single line and bowed, saying, "Reporting as requested, Sandaime-sama." He coughed a little and leaned forward, saying, "I wish for you 3 to locate Naruto Uzumaki and bring him here. I have to discuss something important with him." The third headmaster nodded. "Yes, good." After standing motionless, the ninja saluted, saying, "As you command, Sandaime-sama." The third headmaster raised his hand to dismiss them after grinning and saying, "Good." With a heavy sigh, he sat back in his chair and groaned as they left his office. He ought to get up and walk around a bit because he had been seated in that chair for much too long. "Why not?" he asked, glancing at a pile of documents he had neglected to hand to the receptionist. "After all, I am not doing much else until Naruto gets here." He got up, picked up the pile of papers, and left his office, heading down the corridor in the direction of the receptionist. He could have sensed a lone shinobi using a seal dispelling technique to remove the seals on his windows, then slipped in and headed straight for the entrance right parallel to the headmaster's desk if he had stayed an extra minute. The shinobi rapidly and carefully removed the door's seals, then picked up the locks without wasting any time. He checked the door for any other concealed traps, then opened it to show what was inside. A sizable chamber with shelves, boxes, scrolls, and text sat behind the door. Nonetheless, the shinobi passed right by it and grinned when they saw their reward. A big, rectangular trunk that was securely shut and sealed. But as he extended his arm to start opening the safe, he heard footsteps approaching the office. The shinobi just snatched the safe in a rush, went to the window that was still open, and jumped out as soon as they secured the safe to their back. The Sandaime returned to his office just a few seconds after the shinobi had fled from it. The Sandaime saw the window and door wide open just as he was ready to go to his desk. He sprinted to the door, his eyes widening in horror, and peered inside, his eyes filled with panic again. "Aid! This is a code red, I repeat, a code red. Someone has just stolen the forbidden scroll. Sound the alarm!" he said as he hurried to his desk and pressed the button beneath it. It didn't take the Sandaime 3 seconds to hear the alarm reverberating through the hamlet, and he saw his shinobi's shapes springing into action as he peered out the window. Naruto. In order to avoid any shinobi or civilians wandering around in the middle of the night, Naruto had chosen to travel via the forests and hide Ninja Town. This had the added benefit of reducing the amount of time he had to spend in the town by a sizable amount. But when he heard the village's alarms ringing, he halted. As he proceeded on his way, he pondered absently why they were raising the alarm. Whatever it was, he was no longer engaged since, after today, he had accepted his new life and would never again look back at this village. Or so he thought. Mizuki. When Mizuki heard the alarms, he sped up and cursed. He ought to have had a contingency plan in case this had occurred. Regretfully, he had to improvise as best he could because his initial plan had failed. Mizuki took out a little map of Hyde Ninja Village Gaker from his pocket as he paused on a tree branch to collect his breath. Little lines, circles, and other newly added elements covered the map. Unaware of the presence of core energy directly behind him, he studied the map. Mizuki! When Mizuki turned around and saw Irika's expression, he almost leaped. Irika said, "Mizuki! What do you think you are doing?" with a stern tone as his eyes widened. "I don't have time to deal with you," Mizuki growled at Irika before leaping out of the trees. Irika started to follow him without wasting any more than a second. Mizuki was able to avoid them as he unleashed a salvo of his own kunai at Irika after Irika threw a volley of his own. Irika did his best to avoid them, but one kunai did manage to nick his cheek. With the chest still attached to his back, Mizuki smiled, turned, and sped away from Irika. Following Mizuki, Irika pulled out a number of shuriken and kunai. He launched himself towards Mizuki, using all of his leg muscles as he sent more core energy into his feet. He hurled the shuriken and kunai one after the other at the treacherous Chunin with as much accuracy as he could. As they flew through the air, the shuriken and kunai headed straight for Mizuki. Mizuki barely escaped having multiple of them puncture him in critical places as he heard them hurtling through the air. Using Naruto. As he made his way to the village gates, Naruto brushed away a few low-hanging tree branches and was ready to let go of them. Thwack! Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, 2 shuriken and 3 kunai pierced the tree he was standing next to, barely a foot or so away from him. What the dash? He said, leaping back and dropping the branch. Af! Naruto had to leap back when he saw a figure fall from the treetops, and he gazed up as he heard the cry of anguish. Mizuki was the owner of the figure, with 2 shuriken in his left arm and a kunai stuck in his thigh. When Irika abruptly leaped from the trees and landed in front of Mizuki and Naruto, he stared in disbelief. As he started to yell at Mizuki, Irika narrowed his eyes and said, Mizuki, of all the despicable things you could have done, this is the worst. His gaze fell on Naruto, who was standing a few steps away from the fallen Mizuki, his eyes full of amazement. With a grunt, Mizuki glanced up at the object he was staring at, and his eyes narrowed. Naruto stared at them for a long moment before saying, What the? Naruto, get the hell away from here! You are in danger! Yelled Irika. Naruto winced and said, What the hell are you Choi? He was able to avoid a kunai that the injured Mizuki had launched at him. Mizuki stood up and grabbed a second kunai with a smirk. Irika acted quickly to prevent Mizuki from obtaining the second kunai knife. Mizuki flinched when he attempted to move his left arm, but the shuriken were still lodged in it, and had to leap back to avoid Irika's blow. Irika swung at Mizuki after drawing a kunai. Irika stumbled away as he tore the shuriken from his arm, but Mizuki was quick enough to parry with his right hand. Mizuki retaliated with a kunai of his own as Irika charged once again. Meanwhile, Naruto was in a state of shock and wanted nothing more than to leave the village. He couldn't understand how he got into this predicament. He's now stuck watching his 2 senseis battle with knives for some reason. You couldn't have just done what you always did and just looked the other way, would you, Irika? Mizuki said, cursing and slamming his kunai on Irika's. Irika pushed against Mizuki, who just sneered and swore, saying, I will never look the other way when one of my comrades tries to betray everything we have been taught. Oh, don't give me that bullshit. I know you kept looking the other way when I was sabotaging that fucking demon brat. What? Irika asked, his eyes widening as he looked at Naruto and then back at Mizuki. Mizuki laughed. Don't play dumb just because the demon is watching us, admit it. You knew damn well I was sabotaging him. You are no better than I am, Irika. Naruto's eyes were fixed on them as Irika turned to face him. A smirk appeared on Mizuki's face as he stared at Irika and said, Hee hee ha, ha ha ha, ha ha. Ha ha ha. Oh, I cannot believe this. He pushed back at Irika and kicked him hard in the chest. You actually had no idea I was sabotaging that fucking demon? He asked, pointing to Naruto. Irika stood up and swore. Mizuki was almost weeping. Oh, I can't fucking believe this. I knew you were naive, but to not notice something that was right in front of you. Oh, come on. I used core energy strings to make his throwing suck. I taught him improper forms. Hell, I even went so far as to get core energy paper that would absorb any writing he put on the papers, And I even etched seals right underneath the floorboards to keep him from doing the bunch-in properly. Man, I honestly thought you hated the demon so much you just looked the other way, but now I know it is because you are a complete fool." Iruka clenched his fist and glanced down. He had been deceived into thinking Naruto was merely a troublemaker, while Mizuki had been working against him from the start. "Hey!" Mizuki and Iruka both glanced up in Naruto's direction. "Are you telling me that I have spent all this time in the academy because one of my senseis decided to sabotage all of my work? And what the fuck are you talking about? Demon?" Naruto asked. His eyes narrowed and his teeth tightened. Both uncertainty and rage were visible in his gaze. When Mizuki observed this, he grinned and remarked, "Oh, you don't know?" in a twisted, sarcastic tone. "But why would you know? The law is still in effect." With wide eyes, Iruka yelled, "No, Mizuki, don't!" and rushed towards Mizuki, attempting to stop him. Just as Iruka leaped at him, Mizuki smiled, took out a kunai, and stabbed him. "Aga!" Iruka was pierced in the side of his abdomen, and he went to his knees, clenching his teeth in agony. Mizuki grinned as she said, "Oh, don't pretend like you care, Iruka. We both know it's because of this demon your parents are dead." Iruka was lying on the ground in agony. "What the hell are you talking about?" Naruto snapped as his eyes widened in bewilderment. "You know how the Nine Beast was defeated?" grinned Mizuki. "How the Yondaime sacrificed his life to destroy the Nine Beasts, to end a menace far greater than any we have ever faced in the history of the elemental nations. It was all a lie." Naruto shot him a stony look in return. Naruto had a puzzled look in his eyes. Mizuki then on. "While the Yondaime did sacrifice himself, it was not to destroy the Nine Beasts, oh no. No spirit art in existence has the power to kill a demon, much less one of Nine Beast caliber. No, the Yondaime, he had only a single option." "No, Mizuki, don't!" Iruka muttered in agony as he attempted to move. Mizuki's eyes glowed crazily as he yelled. "He had to seal the Nine Beasts inside of a living host's body! A baby! You!" Iruka's comments were met with silence. What?" Naruto's eyes enlarged until it seemed as if his eyelids had welded to his skin and were no longer able to close. With a sickeningly sweet tone, Mizuki cackled psychotically and added, "Oh, all these years, you were lied to, hated, treated lower than trash could be treated. Oh, it must have been a nightmare for you." Naruto bowed his head. The abuse, the disregard, the hatred, all of it finally made sense to him. He had always questioned why he was despised and viewed as a killer, a criminal, a monster, a demon, etc. It was because he was the Nine Beast container, not Yoko. The demon's container. "Oh, don't fret, Naruto, I'll ease your pain," Mizuki said, laughing as his eye started to twitch. He then grabbed behind him and took out a folded Fuma shuriken. He then hurled it at Naruto, yelling like a lunatic, "Enjoy the pits of hell, Nine Beast!" "No!" exclaimed Iruka, who was too hurt to stand and block the shuriken. When Naruto awoke from his reverie, he observed the Fuma shuriken sailing in his direction. He was about to shift to barely miss the shuriken as his eyes appeared to tremble as they enlarged even further. Clang! The shuriken abruptly lost their path and sailed into a tree. "What? How did HURGH?" Mizuki's eyes widened, but he was hushed when a kunai knife was inserted into his throat. A ninja stood by him, his mask covering his face as he ripped the kunai from Mizuki's throat. He swiftly removed the chest from Mizuki's back as he collapsed to the ground, letting his bloody corpse splatter the ground. "Is the target secure?" the ninja asked, joined by two others, one of whom had a distinctive mark identifying him as the leader. The ninja who had struck the fatal blow held up his chest and remarked, The target is secure, and the threat neutralized. After nodding and surveying the area, the leader of Ninja walked up to Irika and leaned down, looking up at the other member of Ninja and saying, "Get a medic stat. He is bleeding out badly." As instructed, the other ninja promptly employed Shunshin to obtain a medic name. The lead ninja was halting the blood flow in the meantime by applying fundamental medical knowledge. "Enrda!" Irika gasped out, winced. When he finished speaking, the ninja turned to face the lone blonde, who was still standing there. After executing Mizuki, the ninja approached Nerda and said, "Nerdo-san, I am ordered to dash." Nerdo ignored the ninja and started walking away, saying, "Nerdo-san, where are you going?" "I am ordered to dash." Nerdo exploded. "What the hell does it look like? The village gates are in this direction, and after hearing what Mizuki said, it has only solidified my decision." "What decision?" the ninja asked, looking perplexed. With icy cerulean blue eyes, Nerdo turned his head and said, "To leave Hyde Ninja Village Geikir no Sato." He then turned away and started to leave. Before Nerdo could get 3 feet, the ninja materialized in front of him through a shunshin. The ninja grasped Nerdo's shoulder after he leaped back a little, saying, "That is something I cannot allow. I have orders, and there is a standing order to have you brought before Sandaime-sama, immediately." Just as the other ninja returned with the medics, Nerdo was unable to speak as the ninja swiftly utilized shunshin. The office of Sandaime. After receiving a report from one of his ninja, the third headmaster nodded his head and sighed. It seemed that the ninja who had been dispatched to recover the medic had run into another ninja and told them that the scroll had been successfully retrieved. A great wave of relief washed over him when the ninja promptly reported to the Sandaime. "One issue down. I only hope that Nerda dash." He moaned deeply as he quickly dismissed his ninja. Unexpectedly, Shunshin, a ninja, showed up in his office with Nerdo Uzumaki's shoulder in his grasp. This startled the third headmaster, who then shook his head and said, Thank you for retrieving Nerdo, you are dismissed." Nerdo Uzumaki was left in the Sandaime's office after the ninja nodded his head and disappeared in a shunshin. "Nerdo, I am sure you are curious as to why you have been brought before me," the Sandaime said, coughing. "Damn right I do. I was on my way to leave Hyde Ninja Village when your ninja said there was a standing order to have me brought before you," Nerdo said as he turned to face the Sandaime. The eyes of the third headmaster grew wide. Did Nerdo wish to depart from Hyde Ninja Village? What? Why would you wish to leave Hyde Ninja Village?" the third headmaster stammered. Nerdo was gritting his teeth, his anger welling up within him. "Why would I want to leave this kami-forsaken village? Why wouldn't I want to leave it is the better question, but since you asked the first one, I'll humor you." He took a deep breath and spoke. "For as long as I could remember, I have been treated worse than even the worst child rapist. I have been beaten, brutalized, and spat upon by civilian and shinobi alike, only barely surviving by passing shinobi managing to get me to the hospital in time to save me, only for those same shinobi who saved me to be brutalizing me during the next beating. After all this, I chose to become a shinobi for the sole reason to become strong enough to defend myself when I was attacked. But the damn academy only teaches so much in terms of combat and self-defense, and focuses more on literacy than anything else." Nerdo's eyes seemed to dilate as his fists clenched tightly. "I tried 3 times to graduate the exam to become an official shinobi of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir, so that I could become strong, so I could get the training I need to defend myself, to never be defenseless again." Nerdo took a deep breath, and spoke in a cold, dead tone. "But it seems I can't even be given the right to participate in the exam. The first 2 times I was beaten to such a bloody pulp that I could barely walk on my own, and even though the reason for me missing the exam was not my fault, it still counted against me. Today's exam was my last shot. I sent a ninja to escort you so that you would not be attacked this time." said the third headmaster, his voice booming with panic. Screamed. Oh, thank you very fucking much, Sandame Sama. He said with a voice that was clearly sarcastic. That was really helpful. It really helped me a lot, HA. I was set up to fail the moment I walked through those academy doors. My tests were rigged, I failed, I never have another chance to be a shinobi, and it is because of you. Now you listen here, I did not know that your tests were being tampered with, said the third headmaster, squinting his eyes. Naruto exploded. Like you did not know I was the container of the 9 Beast no Yoko? Who told you that? The third headmaster asked, his eyes widening in surprise. Naruto laughed. The same person who rigged my tests, Mizuki, and judging by the reaction of Irika, and you just now, I can only assume that it is true. Naruto, you must understand that I swore the third headmaster. Naruto hit the desk with his fist. Understand what? That I was treated like a criminal, a demon, a monster? All because of something that was not my fault, something I had no control of, something that I did not even know about. That begs another question as to why I was never told. You feel like answering that question? It was for the greater good, Naruto, you must understand, said the third headmaster, lowering his head. Naruto sniffed and turned to head for the office door, saying, And that logic and reasoning is why I am leaving this village, that those less fortunate have to suffer for the benefit of those with more fortune. Naruto, you cannot leave Hyde Ninja Village, said the third headmaster as he got to his feet. Naruto went to him and said, Oh, and why is that? I am not a shinobi of this village, I am a civilian. Hell, I am not even legally allowed to re-enter the academy because of your own laws. Tell me, what possible reason could there be to me staying in this village, tell me? Naruto, being what you are, the seal upon you is affected by your emotions. If you allow your emotions to overcome you, or if you unintentionally will it, you will release the seal and you will die, said the third headmaster, who panicked and spoke rapidly. Scowled. Yet another reason to leave this village. If you, the leader of the village, cannot even take the effort to tell me, the container, the truth, then why should I stay here? Since you clearly did not care enough to teach me about this seal earlier in my life. After cursing, the third headmaster had to come up with the idea that you will be at risk from bandits and shinobi if you leave Hyde Ninja Village. He sighed. And being at the mercy of the villagers and civilians in my own village is so much better, I assume? At least beyond the walls of Hyde Ninja Village, I am not at constant threat of being assaulted by my neighbors. Naruto, please, you wanted to be a shinobi, right? Well, what if I graduated you by my authority as headmaster? You would be able to grow stronger and the third headmaster said, swallowing. And stick me with a sensei who no doubt hates my guts. He continued, but Naruto interrupted, turning around and making his way to the door. Naruto, the moment you walk beyond the walls of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir, I will have no choice but to send Hunter Neen after you, said the third headmaster, clenching his fist and biting his lip. Naruto reached for the door and paused. Like it or not, Naruto, because of what you are, it is your fate to be a shinobi of this village, the third headmaster went on, exhaling so loudly that he started to gasp. Naruto stood there, his hand extended to grip the door handle, and after a minute, the hand slowly moved to his side without making any movement. Naruto, the third headmaster sighed. A chilly voice reverberated from Naruto's position. Is that so, Sandame? The coolness of Naruto's voice appeared to make the third headmaster jump, and he started to slowly turn around, his eyes staring holes into the Sandame, as he spoke in a voice as cold as steel. If that is the case, and if what you say is true, how I could simply will the 9 beasts to escape from its seal. His eyes widened and he hissed. Why don't I simply release the 9 beasts? Right here, right now. The third headmaster's eyes had never been so terrified, and he started to perspire profusely. Why you wouldn't? He said, glancing momentarily out at the village before turning back to Naruto. Try me. Naruto scowled and clenched his fist. The third headmaster shuddered and started tapping his fingers on his desk, trying desperately to come up with a solution to this problem. As a jinchuriki, a weapon, and a deterrent, Naruto was the village's greatest asset, yet he was currently caught between a rock and a hard place. They were still recuperating from the conflict with Kumo and the Nine-Beast onslaught, so losing him would undoubtedly allow other villages to invade. However, if Naruto so desired, the entire village would be destroyed in less than 30 minutes at most. This would be particularly true if the abrupt unleashing of the Nine-Beast caused an avalanche on the headmaster monument, hastening the demise of Hyde Ninja Village. There was nothing else he could do. Wheezing, the third headmaster said, I'll make you an offer, Naruto. Naruto looked at him. I don't want to live in this village, Sandaime. What could you possibly offer me? Just hear me out, please, the third headmaster gasped. Naruto sighed and scowled, asking, What are you offering, Sandaime? Third headmaster gulped and spoke. The moment you achieve the rank of Chunin, you will be given travel rights that far exceed the travel rights I myself gave to my students, the Sannin. You can go beyond Hyde Ninja Village, beyond Hai no Kuni, even beyond the elemental nations themselves if you wish. He placed one hand on his heart, while the other was suspended in the air. I swear, on my honor as the clan head of the Sarutobi, and Sandaime head master of Hyde Ninja Village Geikyo no Sato, that even upon my death, this will not change. The third headmaster was perspiring on the inside. He knew that this was a very slim chance, but he had no other choice. The travel privileges would be pointless nonetheless if he desired the opportunity to cultivate genuine allegiance to Hyde Ninja Village in Naruto. He only needed to make sure that Naruto's life in Hyde Ninja Village was far better than the one he had been compelled to lead since birth. What is stopping you, or the council, from denying me my right to become Chunin, even if I accept this offer to begin with? Naruto scowled and squinted. Third headmaster bit his lip. The decision to make you a Chunin does not solely rest upon the governing body of Hyde Ninja Village, it also falls upon daimyos, lords, and other village leaders who come and attend the exam. If you are worried about them being bought out by the council, do not fret. The council does not have enough money combined to bribe the least wealthy of the lords, and all the daimyos and lords desire only the highest quality of Chunin. I will also ensure that the council is unbiased in its decision, and... He gulped and spoke. I promise on the life of my children and my grandchildren that I will be honest in my part in the decision to make you a Chunin. Naruto scowled as he observed the third headmaster hastily drafting a document, which he then signed and sealed. After giving it some thinking, Naruto had to concede that this deal had potential. It would be 7 months before the Chunin exam started. He could be free of the village forever if he trained hard and passed the Chunin examinations, earning the title of Chunin. When he wondered, what if I am saddled with a sensei who tries to sabotage me? Naruto growled. While glancing over the figure, the third headmaster muttered a curse. Breathing deeply. That will never happen, Naruto, I promise you, that if such a thing occurs, then the sensei will be charged at the highest penalty of the law, public execution. Naruto nodded and went back to reviewing the agreement. The only drawback to the agreement thus far was that he was unable to leave Hyde Ninja Village due to his obligation to abide by its laws. However, all of that would change once he became a Chunin. All he needed to do was obtain the necessary training materials and... At that thinking, Naruto stopped. Training materials, his parents. He had always pondered the identity of his parents, if they were shinobi, and if so, whether they had left him any spirit art, skills, or other artifacts. He had frequently heard that, if their parents were known, orphans were given items from their relatives to use for training and education. He also seriously doubted that the Sandaime were unaware of his parents' identities, given that he was the container of 9 beasts. My parents, who were they? Naruto said, carefully turning his head to face the third headmaster. Naruto. The third headmaster's face appeared to pale slightly, and he appeared to freeze at the inquiry. Answer me right now! Naruto gritted his teeth and narrowed his gaze, indicating that the Sandaime was attempting to avoid the subject. I am not going to ask you again, who are my parents? He said. Naruto, I don't know how to tell you this, said the third headmaster, breathing heavily and biting his lip. Just tell me the truth, who the hell are my parents? Naruto yelled anxiously. Your father is Minato Namikaze, Yondaime headmaster of Hyde Ninja Village Geikyo no Sado, said the third headmaster, flinching and lowering his head. Naruto's eyes grew wide as he gazed at the Yondaime's stone visage and the headmaster memorial outside the window. He had been cursed to this torment by his own father. And my mother? Naruto said, gritting his teeth and turning to face the third headmaster. The third headmaster turned away, flinching even more. Naruto growled, Answer me, damn it! Who is my mother? And where the hell is she? Naruto, your mother abandoned you the moment she had been told you had become a Jinchuriki. She had wholly believed you were the 9 beasts no Yoko. Nothing I said could have persuaded her otherwise. The third headmaster appears to have tightened his grip on the table as he spoke, sighing and turning to face Naruto. I am sorry, Naruto. The last I heard from her, she said she had been training your brother and sister to kill you. The room was silent as Naruto's fists clenched so hard that his nails started to sever his palms and his teeth seemed to grind against one another. Naruto, I want you to know the said the third headmaster after observing Naruto's condition. Slowly and silently, Naruto turned around and opened the door. He left the elderly headmaster in his office by himself, without saying a word or creating any noise. Third headmaster had no idea what was going to happen today, as he buried his head in his hands. Closely observed by God's eyes. In other places, thick layers of stone, fire, and the darkness of a realm far more dreadful than any place on the mortal realm are stacked deep within an ancient realm, encased in an endless, desolate wasteland. More magnificent than the finest cities created by the best craftsmen, and more horrifying than the worst nightmares, is a palace situated over a lake of red waters deep below the old cavernous world. A creature stood in the middle of this enormous palace, watching what was happening in the mortal world. The pillars in its realm obscured its figure, which gazed into a pool of red waters that swirled as it gave the figure what its eyes wanted. The figure appeared to laugh to itself and said, in a voice that was both majestic and menacing, At long last, it is time. The figure extended its hand while still obscured by the enormous pillars, and in an instant the water started to change, swirling more quickly as the figure laughed to itself again. An ethereal force flowed out of the buildings around the figure as it moved away, converging into a single point and spinning into a twisting ether as the entity entered the anomaly. The figure let a wry smile adorn its face as it entered the oddity. Finally, the abyssal god had discovered his earthly servant. While reading the contract several times over, the third headmaster considered Naruto's reaction to it, carefully examining each sentence, word, and punctuation. Would there be something he wanted added, or a section he wanted changed? As he thought about this, a lot of questions raced through his head. Hyde Ninja Village might benefit or suffer if Naruto wanted a portion of the contract changed. Then there was the issue of Naruto's request for something to be added. What may happen to Hyde Ninja Village if he were to make such a demand? The council came next. No matter what suggestion he made, the council would undoubtedly oppose this, third headmaster was certain of it. Even the most rational members of the council turned against the boy after learning that Naruto was the Jinchuriki to the Nine Beasts, the same demon that had destroyed Hyde Ninja Village, murdered their relatives, and massacred their fellows. They saw the monster sealed inside of him rather than the boy himself. A majority of the council opposed any suggestion that would have favored the blonde Jinchuriki in any way, even though over time the more sensible members began to see reason and began to see Naruto as the container rather than the contained. He let out a deep sigh. The council did not like his position. There was not enough fresh blood leaving the academy to make up for the losses, much less ones that matched the deceased in skill level. Hyde Ninja Village had already experienced numerous setbacks, including the Nine Beasts' attack on the village, the war with Kumo, and the Uchiha massacre. More than appeasing a chamber full of counselors, Hyde Ninja Village needs their Jinchuriki. He set the contract down carefully, put his hands on the chair's sides, and started to slowly get up. Sandaime-sama! Suddenly, as if panting, a ninja rushed through the still open door and exclaimed, Sandaime-sama, I have news! The third headmaster's expression was one of obvious annoyance and displeasure as he looked up. The events of the day had robbed him of any patience he might have had in such a situation. Normally, he would have demanded what was wrong to make the ninja exhausted simply by trying to get to his office. You had better have a damn good reason for barging into my office unannounced and dash. Naruto Mom Namikaze has just returned to Hyde Ninja Village Geikir. The third headmaster's eyes widened as they opened so fast that the friction left his eyelids stinging. What? He exclaimed as he bounded around his desk and grabbed the ninja's shoulders. Naruto Mom Namikaze is back? He cried. Under their mask, the ninja was startled and said, Why yes. And as per your standing orders to inform you should Naruto Mom Namikaze ever return to Hyde Ninja Village, I came here as fast as I could. After a brief minute of staring at the ninja, the third headmaster finally comprehended what he had heard. Namikaze, the Naruto mother, has been teaching her kids to murder her other child for the past few years. She was back. In a fit of rage and surprise, the third headmaster yelled, Shit! And shoved the ninja out of his way as he hurried down the hallway and toward his office door. He turned around quickly and yelled, Naruto! He listened and waited for a reaction, anything, but he got none. Cursing, he turned around and said, Naruto, where are yo dash? But he stopped in the middle of his sentence, as he noticed something in the corner of his eye. He then gasped inwardly in astonishment and fear. He turned his head slowly and prayed to himself that what his eyes told him he was seeing was not what he was actually seeing. He prayed it was a trick of the light, that it was incorrect, that he was seeing hallucinations as a result of the strain the events of the day had put on him. He came forward, trembling, and looked at the wall clock. Please, Kami, no. The clock he saw every day as he entered his office, the clock he had just repaired to make sure it was always on time, the clock he had seen right before Naruto arrived. The clock informed him that he had spent more than an hour in that office reading that material. The third headmaster felt the world crumble around him, his breath catching and his heart pounding. After Naruto had hurried out of his office, how intent was he on that document that he let an hour go by? If Naruto had wanted to, he could have reached the gates and fled Hyde Ninja Village by now. He could have already been halfway to the closest border town. And he had an hour ahead of them if he was still in the village, so by the time his ninja discovered him, his mother would already have a Naruto, Mom! He hurried back into his office, pushing the same ninja aside as he ran behind his desk, and the third headmaster was overcome with panic. Attention, aide, this is a code red. All shinobi are to find Naruto Uzumaki and bring him to my office. He is to be brought to be alive and unharmed. That is an order, bellowed the third headmaster, panting as he withdrew his hand from the button and leaned against his desk, his knuckles turning white as he dragged his nails across the desk. He did this without wasting a single motion. The third headmaster looked up slowly and swore. The ninja, who had been pushed twice by the Sandaime, was looking at the third headmaster in the meantime, attempting to determine their next course of action. The third headmaster snarled and let out a huge outburst of murderous intent just a second after looking up. "Well? What are you still doing here? You heard my orders, no go," he said. The moment the ninja's heart stopped, they bowed. "Hi Sandaime-sama!" and rapidly disappeared in a shunshin. With a single query racing through his mind, the third headmaster lowered his head and fell into his chair. His hands slowly rose, their fingers entwining with one another as he pressed his forehead against them. Why? Why was today the only day that Nerdamam could have gone back to Hyde Ninja Village? He had a rogue Chunin steal the prohibited scroll just hours before, and shortly after, the same rogue Chunin had to go tell the one person who was never supposed to know about the 9 beast attack the truth. The one individual who, simply by virtue of his nature, was a far more valuable resource than the forbidden scroll itself. The most terrible aspect of all of this was that the asset was not a tool or an item. Rather, it was a real being with ideas, feelings, and free will, and at the moment, he held all the cards. The third headmaster was no fool. He understood that a Jinchuriki could never lead a stable existence, much less a happy one, just by virtue of their nature. Making sure the Jinchuriki were loyal to Hyde Ninja Village Geikir no Sato was the best he could do. But it seems he had failed in that attempt. The third headmaster sighed as he gently raised his head and looked at the document he had drafted, which was his only remaining hope of retaining Nerdu in Hyde Ninja Village. His final chance was now in the hands of a vindictive lady who wanted to ruin the very child she had given birth to. "This is a code red. All shinobi are to find Nerdu Uzumaki and bring him to my office. He is to be brought to be alive and unharmed. That is an order." As the alarm sounded and the identical message he had given his assistants reverberated around the community, the third headmaster turned his attention in that direction. He glanced up at the wall clock and sighed. 1 minute. Just 1 minute had gone by since he had sent that message to his help. Years earlier, just hours after his own father had transformed him into a Jinchuriki, he and his ninja managed to stop Nerda's mother from driving a kunai into his chest in just 1 minute. However, Nerda's mother had been outnumbered 10 to 1 years prior due to her weakness from giving birth to triplets. If he had met her alone, he was certain that she would have easily chopped him down before doing the same to Nerda, but she had only acceded to his demands because of this. That was years ago, and even when she was weak from giving birth, he had no hope of defeating her by himself. In the meantime, Ndamam had more than 12 years to develop herself. He had no idea how strong she had become, what abilities she possessed, or what flaws in her methods she had eliminated. Third headmaster had to ask himself as these thoughts ran through his mind, even with all of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir shinobi at his disposal, if the need arose, if he had no choice but to battle her head-on. Did he have a chance at all? In the meantime. "This is a code red. All shinobi are to find Nerdu Uzumaki and bring him to my office. He is to be brought to be alive and unharmed. That is an order." From the residential area, where shinobi woke up and hurried into the streets, to the slums, where ninja patrols intensified their efforts, this one message reverberated throughout Hyde Ninja Village Geikir. A group of Chunin circled in the merchant district as a Jonin started to yell commands at them. "I want 6 of you heading north. Check the alleys, the homes, any place the little brat could have hidden. I want them checked." "You 3," the Jonin said, indicating 3 Chunin. "Circle the merchant district. Check the sewers and stalls." The Jonin turned to face the others. "All of you with me, We are going to cover east and west. Do not overlook a single place the brat could have hidden. I don't care if it is an abandoned warehouse or a trash can, if by some means he could hide there. Look! He snapped around, saying, You have your orders, now go! The Jonin led the remaining Chunin as the Chunin left without a second's notice. Such scenes took place across Hyde Ninja Village in Gakure, where all of the shinobi, genin, chunin, jonin, and even ninja were hunting every possible hiding place for Naruto. They were so intent on their work that they failed to see the three people strolling down the main street. A stunning woman stood in front of the group, wearing a closed pair of shinobi boots that appeared to have dried blood stains on the edges. She was wearing a tight-fitting pair of hakama leggings that had armor plates across her knees and the sides of her legs. A black belt, speckled with stains colored with blood, was wrapped around her waist. Her upper body was adorned with a form-fitting haori that hugged her ample bust. It was adorned with a series of overlapping metallic plates that covered her arms, sides, and abdomen. She wore gauntlets on both arms, each knuckle embellished with a metallic spike, and on each shoulder were pauldrons formed of the same overlapping designs so frequently seen in the daimyo's samurai armor. The woman herself was stunning, with soft facial features that were emphasized by her fair yet pale skin tone. Her eyes were a stunning violet that seemed to sparkle like the ideal jewel. The vivid crimson-red hair that cascaded down her back, beyond her lower back, framed her face with two long bangs, and partially kept up by a single hair clip on the left side, added to her already striking attractiveness. The furrowed brow and angry scowl that appeared to have been permanently engraved on her face were the only things that detracted from her attractiveness. The woman was none other than Naruto Namikaze, mother of Naruto Uzumaki and the widow of Yondaime headmaster Minato Namikaze. This is a code red. All shinobi are to find Naruto Uzumaki and bring him to my office. He is to be brought to be alive and unharmed. That is an order. With a frown decorating her features, Naruto swung her head up to gaze at the speakers that repeatedly played the same message. So, third headmaster, is that your plan? Naruto's hand tightened and she growled inside. Ka-sama. The two behind her caught Naruto's attention. A girl was standing behind her, wearing closed shinobi boots that appeared to have been worn based on the ragged edges. She was wearing a tight-fitting pair of hakama leggings that had armor plates across her knees and the sides of her legs. A gray cloth sash, smeared with a good deal of filth, was wrapped around her waist. Her upper torso was adorned with a form-fitting haori that hugged her bosom. A set of overlapping metallic plates adorned the haori, protecting her arms, sides, and abdomen. The daughter was by no means ordinary, but she was not nearly as attractive as Naruto. Her features were gentle, similar to those of Naruto, yet they had a sharpness that set her apart from the softer beauty of Naruto. Her skin had a distinct brown tone to her, making it less fair and pale than Naruto's. She had blue eyes that were tinged violet and glistened in the night sky. Furthermore, she wore her long blonde hair in a top knot on top of everything else. The girl was Natsuki Namikaze, the daughter of Naruto Uzumaki's sister Minato Namikaze and Naruto's mother Namikaze. A boy in a closed pair of samurai greaves stood to the girl's right. A tight-fitting pair of hakama leggings with armor plates covering his knees and the sides of his legs wrapped around his lower body. There was a gray cloth sash around his waist, smeared with a good deal of grime. He wore lightweight armor pieces on his forearms, samurai pauldrons on each shoulder, and a samurai chest piece on his upper body. Although there were rounding traits that set the boy apart from the Yondaime, the boy's facial shape was very similar to theirs. His skin tone was a notable tan, but by no means was it pale. In addition to having electric blue eyes with black pupils, he had a single scar beneath his left eye that appeared to be faded, possibly from an old wound. He had reddish hair on top of his head, but it was tainted by a lighter shade, turning it nearly blondish red. With two long bangs framing his face, the hair appeared to stand up in spikes along the sides. The hair then slid back, the light spikes overlapping as it went gently down his neck. The boy was Erasure Namikaze, the son of Naruzumaki's brother Minato Namikaze and Naruto's mother Namikaze. Yes? Naruto's mother asked, her eyes stern, but there was a certain care in them as she gazed at her daughter. Is it time, Kasama? Natsuki said in a quiet but forceful voice that was full of assurance and conviction. Yes, Otome, it is time. Naruto's mom turned to face Erasure, her smile gone, and said, Erasure, while putting her hands on Natsuki's shoulders and walking up to her, staring at her tenderly and allowing a tiny smile to appear. With a nod, Erasure reached behind him and activated a seal that was out of sight. A tiny pop sounded, a puff of smoke emerged, and a single scroll emerged from it. Erasure held it out while firmly saying, Kasama. After accepting the scroll, Naruto's mom nodded and said, Thank you, Sochi. She then turned around, her back to Natsuki and Erasure, and bit into her thumb, causing blood to slowly flow down her hand. Naruto's mom smeared the blood on the scroll's edge with a single motion, saying, Kai. A cloud of smoke then silently burst from the scroll, and she quickly withdrew her hand after thrusting it into the smoke. Looking at Naruto's mom's hand, Natsuki and Erasure noticed 3 katanas in its grasp, almost knotted together, each covered in a white scabbard, the edges of which were marked with runic characters that were not familiar to the common tongues of the elemental countries. The 3 Namikaze, however, were all too familiar with what they stated. After untying the 3 katanas, Naruto's mom lowered her arm and tossed one to Erasure and another to Natsuki, who swiftly fastened the katanas to their own sashes. After tying the katana to her own sash, Naruto's mom dropped the scroll that had previously held them. When Naruto's mom was done, she looked at her kids and said firmly, Search Hide Ninja Village quickly, find the demon, and kill him. Natsuki and Erasure nodded, saying, Hi, Kasama. And if anyone gets in your way, said Naruto's mom once more. She turned to face them, her eyes hardened, and she grabbed her katana's hilt. Together, Erasure and Natsuki said, Anyone who protects the demon is no better than one. Now go, avenge your brother, said Naruto's mom, nodding her head. Naruto's mom was left alone as Erasure and Natsuki quickly turned and went in different places. Slowly turning around, Naruto's mom gazed up at the sky, sighing deeply as she brought a single hand to her heart and tightened it around the hilt of her katana. Soon, my precious Sochi, you shall be free of your torment and you may finally rest in peace, she said, as a single tear trickled down her cheek. This I swear, Naruto. Naruto's mom ran off in a different direction without wasting any time, and the shinobi of Hide Ninja Village continued to ignore them. In the meantime, the shinobi were looking anywhere Naruto might hide in the town of Hide Ninja Village. Geikir. Trash cans, sewers, abandoned structures, and even the tunnels in the headmaster monument are examples of this. But no one had thought to examine the training grounds and forests immediately outside the settlement boundaries. Naruto strolled carefully over dirt trails that wound and turned through the village's surrounding trees deep within the woods. His hands hung loosely at his sides and his head fell, his hair covering his eyes. Following his departure from the office, Naruto strolled around Hide Ninja Village, surveying the area as the locals passed him, each staring at him with hate in their eyes, their faces contorted into sneers, their hushed whispers loaded with venom and disdain. All because he was the Jinchuriki of the 9 beasts, not Yoko, and because his own father, no less, had used him to restrain the beasts from the moment of his birth. He found it repulsive. He had wandered into the neighboring forests, far from the scumbags he had come to hate, because he could no longer bear to be in the main hamlet. He was really alone in the forest at this hour of the night, with everyone else either sleeping, patrolling the settlement, or taking in the nightlife. Naruto's thoughts drifted as he strolled into the forest, and he became so absorbed in them that he lost awareness of the outside environment. He could hear nothing coming from the trees or the village behind him. Rather, 1,000 truths rushed through his subconscious, tormenting his mind with image after image. His own mother had left him behind and had been preparing his siblings to murder him in the future. He had endured abuse from the community all of his life. From the time of his birth until now, he had served as a scapegoat for their sorrow, their anguish, and their anger. Because the matron was unable to see past her sorrow and suffering, the orphanage had cast him out at a young age, turning him into a street rat. For something he had never had a say in, he had been denied fundamental human rights. He had been hospitalized for someone else's transgressions, tortured, and beaten. From the beginning of his possible shinobi career, he had been undermined. The saddest part of all was that he was forced to bear this burden by his own father, who had been regarded as the Yondaime head master of Hyde Ninja Village Geikyo no Sato. His fists clenched so tightly that his claws started to splinter his palms as his teeth mashed together, as these truths raced through his head. He was unaware that he had actually strayed from the dirt trails that wound through the woodlands as his rage grew and the memories of his life raced before his eyes, causing his speed to quicken to the point where he was racing through them. The sounds and lights produced by Hyde Ninja Village Geikyo were becoming so faint as to be indistinguishable. As Naruto continued to run through the woodlands, his jaw tensed and his fists clenched, blood dripping between his fingers as his nails dug into his hands, and he saw flashing visions of his history, every terrible event that had happened to him, and every sin that had been perpetrated against him. Even though the pictures that were constantly flashing in front of his eyes were obstructing his vision, Naruto continued to run faster and faster. As a result, Naruto lost his balance and fell to the ground after failing to notice the stone protruding from the ground. His bones creaked as he continued to slide, flopping to the ground and then skidding to a stop in a tangled mess of his own limbs. Naruto lay flat on the ground with his arms out and his face in the soil, making no movement other than the expansion and deflation of his chest as he breathed in and out. He began to walk gently, digging his fingers into the ground and bending his right arm to get it closer. Instead of pushing himself up, his hand was in a position where his fingers curled into a fist and dragged through the earth once more. His fangs were exposed as he continued to swing his right arm back and bash it into the ground while swinging it as high as he could in his posture, and then swinging it down, pounding his fist into the soil. He pushed himself up as he screamed, "Arg!" and slammed his left hand into the ground, smashing blow after blow, left and right, into the dirt he had been lying in just moments before. His right arm was bent as he swung his left arm, his fingers burrowing into the soil as they curled into a fist. Naruto's face twisted into one of utter rage and contempt as his fists punched into the ground, each blow raising a billowing cloud of sand and dirt. As Naruto's fist struck the ground, his face was contorted into an expression of unadulterated rage and loathing. Naruto's blows alone had made a tiny pit. Naruto flexed his fingers, which were badly injured from his pounding the ground, and his breathing became labored. Naruto looked up, his teeth clenched, and his breathing sped. One of the big trees in front of him towered over the others with pride. It was a stunning tree that he had never seen before. But in his passion, he didn't care. All he saw was another target for his rage. "Arg!" he yelled, leaping to his feet and repeatedly burying his fist in the tree's bark before moving on to the other arm. He swung his leg, slamming it against the tree as his knuckles started to peel from his mistreatment of it. His leg moaned as it made contact with the tree. Naruto was aware of his suffering, but his rage overcame his desire to ease it. Naruto hit the tree with relentless savagery as his rage, hatred, and every other emotion he was experiencing at the time erupted violently out of his eyes, which were glaring daggers at the tree. In the meantime, his rage caused the seal on his stomach to pulse quickly, and a red glow started to radiate from it. Naruto's previously round pupils shrunk into slits, and a crimson hue started to seep into his irises, his gaze still burning holes into the tree. He snarled deeply as his canines grew larger, drew back his right palm, and yelled, "Rafag!" in a demonic, aggressive tone before slamming his fist forward. He was striking a tree and tearing a huge chunk off of it. Naruto's eyes turned from cerulean blue to blood red, his whiskers grew thicker and more fierce, his nails grew somewhat longer and sharper to points, and he stood there panting. "Rafa!" Naruto's panting turned into strained growls as he erupted in rage, hurling himself at the trees nearby, smashing his fists into them and severing their trunks. He also ripped up the ground in chunks, smashed his hands into the dirt, and smashed his hands into boulders with such force that they shattered like glass. Finally, his legs tore the tree trunks in two. He was unaware of the force that bolstered him and enabled him to tear stone and trees to pieces. The Hyde Ninja Village sensed it. Tower of Kage. "Well?" the third headmaster screamed, his rage beginning to consume him more than usual as he glanced between the two ninja who had just arrived at his office. The ninja who was larger said, "Sandaime-sama, we have checked all over the village, and there is no sign of Naruto anywhere. It is plausible to suggest Naruto has left the village." "Damn it!" the third headmaster said, clenching his teeth and smashing his fist into the desk. He turned to face the other ninja. "Get a group of trackers and find him. If Naruto manages to get past the boundaries of Hai no Kuni, then dash." The third headmaster was abruptly hushed as a terrible, menacing presence, one he had not experienced in years but which he recalled all too well, took over him. "No," the third headmaster said, turning around and gazing out his office window in the direction he sensed the presence coming from. Just outside the main village, inside the boundaries of Hyde Ninja Village, he could make out a faint red spiraling pillar that was slowly rising out of the forests. With his murderous intent barely concealed, the third headmaster gritted his teeth and turned to face the ninja. "So you checked all over the village, did you? Did it seem to escape your mind that the forests inside of Hyde Ninja Village's walls were part of the village?" he said. The third headmaster's stony look made the ninja shudder. "Sandaime-sama, I dash." The Sandaime pushed past the ninja, ignoring them, saying, "Come! We have no time to waste." He left his office and made his way as fast as he could out of the tower. Despite their apparent amazement at what had just transpired, the ninja promptly obeyed the Sandaime's orders. "Please, Kami, don't let me be too late," the Sandaime said, lowering his head as he left the Kage Tower. "With Mom Naruto." As soon as Naruto sensed the surge of Nine Beasts' core energy, she began to dash through Hyde Ninja Village. As she made her way to the trees, she jumped over the several districts of Hyde Ninja Village in an instant. A passionate and unwavering resolve was burning in Naruto's eyes. "Ka-sama!" For a moment, Naruto turned to find Erasure and Natsuki following her. "Ka-sama, the demon is dash!" Erasure jumped forward till he was beside Naruto as they crossed the roofs of Hyde Ninja Village. "Yes, Erasure, it is." Naruto interrupted him, turning her head forward and reaching for her katana's hilt before coming to a stop on the roof of a building that was just outside the forest. Naruto took hold of her blade's hilt and carefully took it out of its sheath. As more of the blade was exposed, silver-white etchings resembling those on the scabbard itself flashed brightly along the length of the blade, which itself shimmered with a silvery brilliance. As she held the sword out in front of her, its shimmering radiance beautifully lighting up the silver blade, a single swing sent a vibrating hum through the night air. Erasure and Natsuki gazed at the sword before turning back to face their own. "Let us end this once and for all, tonight," The nine-beast no Yoko draws its last breath, Nudamam exclaimed, staring straight ahead before launching herself into the jungle with merciless savagery. After giving each other a nod, Natsuki and Erishur swiftly followed Nudamam into the forest while brandishing their own katanas, which were identical to hers. "Hold on, Sochi, Ka-chan is coming," said Nudamam, her eyes burning with the same vicious intent as before as she peered forward and her motions quickened. Nurda. The most amazing and exquisite trees in all of Hai no Kuni have long been found in the forests of Hyde Ninja Village Geikir, both inside and outside the village gates. They were even more magnificent than the trees that the daimyo's gardeners and botanists, who were so excellent that they were themselves artists, had carefully cultivated and cared for. A whole acre of the once immaculate woodland was now lying broken and damaged, as though it were just a pile of twigs that a large beast had stomped on. Nudu Uzumaki himself was at the heart of it all. Nudu stood stooped, gazing at the floor, his body trembling with pain and rage, his breathing labored. As Nudu gently raised his hands, his bones and muscles screamed in pain from such a simple yet demanding movement, and he dropped to his knees, hissing loudly. He gazed at his hands, seeing their shape. His blinding rage had so severely wounded and scraped his hands that he could see the muscles and bones beneath the skin. The flesh was shredded, the bones were shattered, and blood dripped from severed tendons and cut veins between his fingers. However, he was more worried about the crimson haze that burned into his own body and licked across his skin, wrapping around his hands and down his forearms. Nudu's eyes widened in rage as he saw his hands get ragged and watched as the energy from the nine beasts' center restored them. As though they had never been fractured in the first place, the cracked bones splinted back together and burnt with an unpleasant hiss. The tendons flowed back horribly, attaching themselves to the bone like a nasty tar before being encased in the crimson flesh that was soon covered by the skin that had been brutally torn from it only a short while before. Like a morning mist in the dawning day, the crimson haze of the nine beasts vanished as soon as it arrived. Nudu continued to gaze at his hands, which were now unharmed. Arg! Nudu smashed both of his fists back into the ground, panting and heaving as his hatred and malice poured through him once more. He kept staring at his hands, his teeth gritting tighter and tighter as his eyes narrowed until he could hardly see through them. As he considered all that had transpired in his life and everything that had led to his unhappy existence, his eyes popped back open. Without ever thinking about his own son's welfare, his repulsive father chose to seal the nine beast no Yoko inside of him. The Sandaime chose to reveal who he was to the people because he was too preoccupied with his obligation to them to realize the suffering he would endure every day of his existence. His existence was made into an endless and unfair torment by the villagers' activities against him, who used the nine beasts that were sealed inside of him as a tool. Nudu snarled violently as the causes of his suffering mounted and his teeth stiffened. The same entity that had brought him suffering all his life was responsible for every act of cruelty, from the most basic neglect to the most intricate and vicious beating he had experienced in his brief life. Humanity. Even if the nine beasts may have attacked the hamlet, it was a human's choice that turned him into a vessel, made him a target in the same location where he should have been allowed to live, and caused him to endure suffering throughout his entire existence. From the beginning to the present, humanity had been the cause of his misery. Nudu carefully raised his hands from the floor and gazed at them as this knowledge sunk into his mind. His feeble, frail, pitiful, human hands. With his hair covering his eyes, he bent his head and slowly balled his hands into fists. To whatever God will listen, please release me from this suffering. Blood soaked through Nudu's fingertips, making his fists tighten. Get me out of this prison. His fists were bloody and squeezed, and one drop of blood fell from them. Free me from the bonds of humanity. The drop of blood splattered around after smashing on the ground. And set me free from mine. The splattering blood ceased, creating a tiny pool of blood on the ground. Suddenly, the pool of blood started to ripple a little, like the coast of the ocean with a light wind. The blood then started to bubble and swell like boiling water, as steam ascended from the blood's surface. Naruto opened his eyes slowly, smelling the vow fragrance, and looked down to see the tiny pool of bubbling blood. Is that your wish? Naruto's eyes widened as he abruptly rose to his feet, dropping himself into a battle posture and turning to face the direction from whence he had heard the voice. Naruto's eyes got even bigger when he noticed nothing. In an attempt to locate the voice, Naruto's gaze flitted quickly about, searching both left and right. The clouds above, meanwhile, started to merge and became darker until they were as black as sin. Naruto kept scanning the area, asking, "Who's there?" When he didn't hear a response, he yelled, "Where are you?" "Right behind you." When he heard the voice, Naruto froze in place. They were just behind him.